Hey guys, today's another one of Ahmad's and my solo episodes. As you will have already inferred from the episode title, today's podcast will be extending our discussion of our ideas to the topic of friendship and its role in our lives. As you will see, in the first half of the episode, we get very up close and personal, perhaps even intimate with this topic, delving into the origins of our own friendship and some history behind how we came to value friendship in general. In the second half, we switch gears, however, shifting onto a discussion of what we see as the fundamental paradox of friendship and its evolutionary basis, as well as how we can see friendship in a mature and nuanced fashion. If you like the episode, as always, make sure you like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Now, without further ado, the Experiments in Dialogue podcast brings you, only on an island, the paradox of friendship. We hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Experiments in Dialogue podcast. I'm Ahmed Mack, and I'm joined today, as I always am, by my co-host, Yusuf Yusri. How are you doing, Yusuf? How's it going?
I am good. I'm fine. Things are going well. How's it going with you, Ahmed?
Well, things are going well on my side as well. I think now we're recording this somewhat at what one would hope is the end or near end of the lockdown, and a lot of countries are now opening up and giving people a chance to go out. So that's been a bit positive. But on the other hand, I think we still have a bit of a way to go in terms of fully dealing with this epidemic and pandemic. But yeah, I mean, just with that said, you really have a rundown today for us of what exactly we're going to be talking about, right? And I was interested if you could share that.
Yeah, I just happened to do. So, we really wanted to talk to our audience about a friendship and what Ahmed and I call the paradox of friendship, something we came to in one of our, let's call it, abstraction sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And we also want to discuss the importance and necessity of friendship and what evolutionary role it plays in the progression of, well, human value and just human way of life in general. So yeah, I think that really just encapsulates all what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, and I think we'll be covering a few of the interesting topics around friendship, like how exactly friendship maybe came to be and why its value is so central to the human experience and why it's kind of unique to humanity in a way. I mean, there are analogs to it in other animals, but it's not quite as central as it is in our case, right? And
Absolutely.
just to give a bit of background, maybe this might be of interest to some people, and to make it a bit more personal, let's go over just how exactly we met and how we became friends. I mean, we might not necessarily mimic all the details perfectly, as some are harder to disclose than others, but let's go over what exactly happened to come about our friendship.
So the summer of 1969.
Yeah.
No,
It sounds like we're about to launch into
Yeah.
an epilogue about the history of friendship and how exactly it emerges in this form. Yeah.
No, so I believe so. We had common friends,
Mm-hmm.
and with well, I know this about you, but I've also experienced this multiple times that our common friends would just always be like, "Oh, you're such Ahmed Mack," or "You're so similar to Ahmed Mack," and I was always like, "Who's that guy?"
Yeah,
Why
I got the
to me,
same.
right?
Yeah, I got much of the same.
I want to take pride in my individuality. Who's that guy?
Yeah.
So this one time I was in a place called Atamaya with our common friends.
Yeah.
And we're both actually wearing like button-up shirts that day.
Yeah, as
which
the quintessential nerds gear is, right?
Yeah. Like in all our like self-righteousness.
Yeah.
and I'm just standing there, and you just walk up to me, and it was really
Well, it
organic from
wasn't
there,
it
right?
wasn't that simple because actually you
Yeah.
were surrounded by this cadre of people who seemed to be relatively interested in something you had to say as well. So it was almost as though I was coming into a rally of some sorts with some great leader amidst. But yeah, I came by and I was interested in kind of getting to know this specter of similarity that had been following me so far and entering into many of my conversations with others. So I came up to you, and I remember upon coming up to you, the first things that we did was really exchange our names, and then again, just in a very almost story-like fashion, we exchanged our favorite scientists, right? And
Yeah.
that seemed to be kind of our mechanism for measuring each other's up, right? And kind of a
Yeah.
dominance hierarchy rivalry that emerged as soon as we met.
Yeah, just like throwing buzzwords at each other.
Yeah,
That was fun.
yeah,
And also to mention, I think we were about like what, like 18,
yeah,
17 maybe.
yeah.
Something around that
I think it was
time.
18 or 19 actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, 18.
yeah,
18,
definitely
yeah, because
18.
that was my last year in high school.
Yeah, first year in
So
university.
I was 18. Almost I just turned 18 actually.
Yeah, and
So
we're around the same.
you must have been 17 then.
Yeah, I was 17. Yeah, you're right. Actually, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
We've been friends
we've
for
been
long,
friends for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not as long as many people think that we've been, but yeah, I think for a while. Yeah, for a good while.
Yeah, which is really right. Which is fascinating how much we have in common, how much our values converge
Yeah.
without actually having been, um,
Necessarily.
without having emerged like beside each other.
Yeah,
right? Without actually having emerged by contact with each other.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, because we are such fans of Darwin and of evolutionary theory as a biological idea and underpinning for even how we see humans more broadly, we used to make the joke that what we have is a form of convergent evolution. And in
Yeah.
general, convergent evolution is this phenomenon in biology where you observe that two species that live in different, similar habitats but distinct ones, and don't necessarily have a recent common ancestor or a very recent common ancestor, have very similar traits, and you see
Yeah, you
that
can
their
think
traits
of,
evolved independently. Yeah,
you can think of, for example, like fins and dolphins, and then sharks or fish in general.
Mm.
And you can see that like dolphins are mammals. They don't have a common ancestor with, well, they do. I mean, if you go back enough,
Yeah,
but
but not a very
well, they
recent
don't have
one.
but not a very recent common ancestor with fish, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, even though their fins are kind of different, but you see like there's some convergent element in which it
Yeah.
seems that this is the best way to go through water
Yeah,
if you are to live there, right?
exactly. I mean, it seems to be like one of the best strategies for living in water, for adapting to water, for being thriving in water, is to have fins. Similarly, it's almost as though, not to say that our strategy was necessarily the most functional, but it it seems
it
to
was
have
not,
evolved
right?
at least. Yeah. But it seems to at least have evolved twice in our environment. So perhaps there is something to it.
Yeah,
or just
absolutely.
an anomalous thing to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, so just to go on, I think when you and I first met, we were kind of awestruck by the degree to which we shared assumptive layers, right? And it was actually, as people had said, that we were similar. It was not simply a matter of people just speaking as people do. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting for both of us when we were interacting to see just how many things, how many dimensions on which we converged, even though we hadn't actually known each other for so long. And I had people who I'd known for way longer with whom I didn't converge nearly as much as I converge with you.
Mm-hmm.
So with that kind of as the backdrop for our friendship, and maybe just to go into more of the substantial discussion about our views about friendship in general, I was wondering how you had come to see friendship up until that time, and whether it was at all helped or changed by our own friendship. So maybe just how did you see friendship until then, and why was it such an important thing for you? Because I know even back then, friendship was one of your most important ideals, as it was mine.
I mean, I can safely say that our friendship has absolutely amplified the meaning of itself, right? It absolutely amplified the meaning of what it is to have a friend. Not just on the experiential level, right?
Yeah.
Not just on the level of which we have interacted and I have gained, the sentiments that come with being friends with you, but also the expansion of what I believe friendship is now.
Yeah.
Right. I believe that through our talks we have come to insights of why friendship is important and why one should pursue them and so on. So yeah, friendship has played a very important role in my life. Also, maybe perhaps because my family bond is not necessarily a strong one. I've had some turbulence when it comes to my family.
Yeah.
So, and I've also been feeding on certain, like art, whether it be like literature or even television series, movies.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to see certain series or animes, for example, like Naruto, which I always mention.
Yeah.
That is,
we both had that in common.
Yeah, that is almost entirely predicated on the power of friendship.
Yeah.
Almost entirely about a friend trying to save their friend, right? At the cost of his own, comfort and all that.
Yeah. At the cost of even his own loyalties to things like his nation, his culture, right? Yeah. It kind of drills home the notion that whereas you need some sort of connection to these other things, it is really friendship that is the connection beyond all others, right? Because in a way, friendship is that unique bond that you form somewhat voluntarily, but you also come to discover who you are through, right? So the kinds of people that you end up becoming friends with, who resonate with you, are reflective of who you are, right? And you don't know who you are before that, right? You don't know that, many people think that they know the reasons why they happen to be friends with another person, right? They often even might try and list a number of reasons why they're friends, but to some degree you have no idea, right, about what exactly has made that person seem like the person to be a friend with. Yeah, I mean, go on. Yeah. You were saying.
So I was done there, but the point is that friendship is very important to me. I mean, I didn't really have a lot of friends growing up as well.
Yeah.
I didn't really have the time. My time was very calculated and structured. Not by me, but my parents and stuff. I was brought up in a strict household. So I didn't really get to experience friendship in the kind of freedom that you need to as a young person. So also a lot of the friendships I made growing up were I was kind of going into them without the necessary experience to make friendships. And if anything, that just made me more adamant, I guess. I mean, I do appreciate friendship, and I do appreciate the reciprocity that exists within them.
Yeah.
And like you said, you cannot know yourself if you don't have a friend. And it's also just a throwback to a previous episode. It's the closest thing you can have. It's the closest thing you can have to be kind of free of your loneliness of subjectivity.
Yeah.
It's the closest thing you have. Nothing, not being part of a bigger group or a bigger idea. I believe being part of a good friendship, and in some sense, at some time, you can really feel that you are free of it. Or, I mean, to an extent, of course.
Of course.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, in a sense, we come from different backgrounds to some degree with respect to friendships. We both clearly had a very clear idea of what friendship's role was in our lives coming into our own encounter, right? But before that, I had a bit of a different experience because, so growing up, I was someone who was largely, subject to quite a bit of bullying at school, probably to no surprise to people. Not that I didn't do anything to deserve the bullying at times, I did, but at other times it was really purely a function of what people perceived me to be, which is perhaps different in some way or looking a bit weird or whatever, right? But in general, my experience of friendship, perhaps up until elementary school, maybe even slightly after that, was one of not really understanding who I could trust because, you come into this world, you come into these schools as a kid, and you realize very quickly that things are very factioned, right? And
Yeah.
people have found their groups even at a very young age. Like it's so early that people, I remember it to this day, that people just flock to groups and they will do anything. Even so unconsciously, when you are a child, you are willing to do so much to make sure that you belong to the group. And I was simply not very in tune with the things I was required to do to be a part of this group. Maybe I was a bit stupid. I don't know. I mean, perhaps it was something on my part that was lacking, but for some reason, I just did not know how to fit in, right? I just I didn't know what rhythm to dance to in order to not seem like the weirdo who's sticking out that no one really wanted to be friends with. Now, I had a few friends, not to say that I didn't have any, had perhaps two and maybe a group that I could go and join every now and then, but I wasn't ever really a part of. But even those friends that I had, I wasn't exactly secure in. One of whom I was very secure in. The other was willing to some degree to play the game of betrayal the moment there was any conflict. And because I was someone, to be fair, who would engage in a lot of conflict, I'm not being a victim about this in any way, right? I was someone who would get into fights. I was a troubling child. To a significant degree, they would find opportunities where they would have to or would be able to join the other group in order to protect their own skin. And this is something that I discovered really unconsciously as a child. I didn't really take it to heart very much until later on when I realized what that was and when I realized what actual friendship is. And that was really when I entered middle school, and I found people who actually, they would be there. They would actually be there, even when things were tough, even when I wasn't necessarily the most popular person, even when I'd say things that people didn't like. And understanding about myself, something that I didn't really understand as well at the time, but I kind of grasped, that I would necessarily be someone for whom it was not easy to continuously fit into a group, for whom it would be necessarily the case that arguments, disagreements with large groups of people was a norm, right? Understanding that allowed me to kind of come to grips with the fact that a lot of my friends were just there for the moment. And for a while, I became a bit maybe pessimistic, nihilistic, fatalistic about the nature of friendship. But it was only through those few friends that I've mentioned who kind of stuck with me really through thick and thin and through the strangest transformations in my own personality, right, in my own way of viewing the world. Just the ones who stuck with me even when I was a minority within groups, right? They weren't necessarily the people who agreed with me. I'm not saying that they all agreed with everything I said, but they were there. They were there, and they were willing to defend me, and they were willing to stand by my side and be like, hey, I disagree with what you have to say. And we used to have so many arguments and disagreements, sometimes even vehement ones where, we'd just be on such bad terms and there would be so much bitterness. But that didn't mean that they wouldn't defend me when push came to shove. Yeah. And it's really there where my conceptualization of the importance of friendship really solidified and was congealed. And I'm sorry, I'm going a bit on a long rant here, but it's kind of just reviewing through my own history. And just to finish it here, to let you kind of go on,
Yeah, well, my history is a bit different, really,
Hmm.
when it comes to, well, I've I've come to make friends mostly because I used to swim. I used
Hmm.
to go to swimming practice every day for 10 years
Hmm.
since I was 3. So I started at 3. So I had a lot of friends at the club, and well, most of my friends at the club were really, the sense in which friends are kind of, well, you have to be friends with them, right? They're your
Their
teammates.
immediate
But then also, yeah,
peers.
but then
Yeah.
also, yeah, exactly. But then there were also this dynamic with the mothers, right? So the mothers
Oh yeah.
also played a
That's not
huge
good.
role in who you get to be friends with and who you don't get to be friends with.
Yeah.
And well, my mom is kind of strong when it comes to that. So I'd say I'd say I've fallen into a trap when I went to middle school, so I'dadi,
Mm.
prep school, and at this point, because I didn't have a lot of friends before that.
Yeah.
I only have one friend from prep school. Well, from primary school,
Mm.
who's Adham. He's
Oh
my
yeah.
childhood friend.
Yeah.
I don't have any other friends actually from school before I changed schools when I went to high school.
Mm.
But before that, I have no friends from that period. And I think the reason was, um, the reason was me really. I started lying a lot.
Mm.
I started. I mean, it wasn't really a good period, right? I
Mhm.
that was when I got to first go out, by my own with my friends and go places.
Freedom.
And then there was also the girls, and we all wanted to impress them. And well, to impress them, we have to size each other up
Yeah.
well between each other. So I'm not really proud of that period of my life. And if anything, I started growing more and more disgusted at
Mm.
myself, if
Mm.
anything. And it came to a moment where I just left my school, where I think I was locked up for 4 months for doing something bad
Mm.
by my dad. And I've read a lot of books in that period. I think that's my paradigm shift,
Oh,
if
that's
I may.
funny. I have an
Yeah,
analogous period
yeah,
that's very similar to that.
yeah.
And it was exactly in middle school as well. And it was
Mm-hmm.
essentially basically in the period of time right before I had actual friends, I would say. So, yeah, it's a grade 7
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Ula Dedi. And that
Mm-hmm.
was really when I started in the summer of that, which is after a year basically of fighting a lot. I just spent that
Mm-hmm.
year getting into arguments. That was also the year that coincided with kind of the separation between my mom and my dad. And I was just in so many fights that year. And it was only at the end of that year during the summer where I had kind of a paradigm shift period, if you say. Um,
Mm-hmm.
where I started reading, or I rediscovered reading, because I had been a reader in my youth, quite a reader, in fact. My mom
Same.
was a big fan of me constantly reading, and she made me really interested in reading. She was the one who I owe my love for reading to, really, because she had an undergraduate in literature, and her love for reading and books, and the fact that I grew up with books everywhere, made me really passionate about reading. But I kind of lost it. Late elementary school to, let's say, 7th grade. And I rediscovered it in 8th grade, but in a different fashion, because I started reading more adult books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Adult nonfiction in particular, philosophy, science. Not to say that I understood every word, but I was becoming more and more able to. And as I basically was struggling to make this my life, really, because I didn't have friends by then. By the end of that year, I didn't really have many friends. I had maybe one, right? And wasn't really sure about the stability of that friendship. But in general, I just spent so much time reading in that period that I completely changed. And the next year, I came back to school, and my whole views had changed. And it's then when I started getting into a bit of trouble, but also making friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I came in there. Go on. Yeah, what were you?
No, no, no. Sure, sure. Keep going,
Oh,
man.
yeah. So after that, really, after that period of reading, after I made some friends, as I said in 8th grade, and I started realizing the value of them. So in 8th grade onwards, I had those friends. Our friendship was tested by my own changes, right? In my views, the fact that I was getting into a lot of arguments, that I was very different. And to be honest, they did so much to handle it and to deal with it, despite finding this person in their group, which was, to their eyes, to some degree, going insane, right? And to the eyes of many people within the school, many people within the school, within our classes, I was absolutely going insane, right? I was losing my mind, right? But
Yeah.
in reality, what was happening is that I was just accessing knowledge and ideas that just were to some degree forbidden and taboo in our society. And that seemed to be an impetus for people to start leaving me, not to be friends with me, not just to not be friends with me, but even threatening me. And the only ones that stayed, to be honest, despite the enormous stress on our relationship, were this group of nine people who I am still friends. I'm still honored to say I am friends with to date. And one of them in particular was someone who I was basically worst enemies with in my elementary school, but for the fact that we used to have these occasions where we'd meet up at the tennis club and spend time together, right? But otherwise we were enemies. So in school, we were getting into fights all the time, right? Of course, the fights decreased the more time we spent at the tennis club just talking and walking around this track at the tennis club and talking. That's all we would do, and sharing our souls, really, as you put it, from the last episode that we had solo. But essentially, it was that person who then kind of reemerged into my life, and I was so grateful for his reemergence and also the friends that I made then. And I'm still friends with them to date. And those people taught me what friendship was before I ever met you, because they taught me that friendship was not at all about having a group that validates your feelings. It's not what friendship is about at all.
Not that. Right?
It's not at all. Friendship is when people think that you are wrong, when your friends see that you are doing something that seems aberrant, they tell you, right? They tell you. And they tell you and are willing to listen as well, because maybe they're wrong, right? Because in some cases, they were right. I was being aberrant. I was acting out. I was acting terribly. But in other cases, it wasn't actually that I was aberrant. It was that I was, as I said, accessing ideas and information and knowledge that it was taboo, right? But was not necessarily wrong. And through time and through our engagement with each other, they came to see, and it took ages, but they came to see where I was not necessarily just an insane person, right? I was actually, and to some degree, I felt like I was insane at a certain period, but they still treated me as a friend. And that is something that is the most valuable. They treated me as a friend in the sense that they took me seriously. They listened to me. They talked to me. They still invited me to make sure that I wasn't feeling lonely. They were asking me to take care of myself, right? These people were there for me. They didn't necessarily validate my feelings. On the contrary, they were the greatest challenge. It was not the people that I'd met at school who dismissed me as insane who were my greatest challenge on many of these issues. It was them, because they had the most interfacing with me. They were the ones most invested in coming up with counter arguments to my own points, right? And developing them.
Yeah.
And so that was, to me, that was the lens through which I saw friendship. It was people who were there through thick and thin and who would tell you when they saw that you were wrong. It was people who were honest and loyal, right? And I guess this is kind of a very masculine kind of view of friendship, but I think it extends even to feminine conceptions of positive friendship. I don't know what
absolutely,
you think. Yeah.
And so
I mean,
after my paradigm shift, I'd say I just kind of, I went out with this decision really, which is, I'm not gonna lie anymore. That was really the turning point of my 22-year-old life, but that really was the turning point of it. I was just like, I'm not gonna lie anymore. I'm not gonna hang out with people I don't like.
How old were you
I'm not
then?
gonna say something.
Like 13?
I was around maybe 14, maybe. Yeah, around that time, 14 to 15, maybe. And really, that was the main point. It was just, I'm not gonna lie anymore. I'm not gonna say things to just fit in. I'm not just gonna say things to, you know, be liked by women. I'm not gonna do all that. And I had a lot of friends, by the way, in the preceding years to me doing all that. I had a lot of friends. I actually got very popular, and I was surrounded by people. I was really,
Would you call
people
them
were
genuine?
texting me.
Genuine friends or
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay.
It was just
Friends, as
but
in
also because
scare quote
I didn't really
friends.
understand the social dynamic.
Yeah.
I'd say also
Yeah.
I was really mimicking it.
Mm.
Like I was observing what patterns work, and I was just mimicking them without any
Conscious analysis
without any
and understanding.
without any conscious analysis of whether I do believe that's true or not.
Yeah.
And I've said bad things, and I've betrayed people, and it was bad. Like I'm that part of my life really like disgusts me, if I must say. But I mean, I am over it. I try to forgive myself.
Yeah. Mercy with the
And,
justice.
Yeah, so so like just happens to come. I came to the realization that I need to tell the truth, and from there is when I put myself in the actual face of how hard it is to have a friendship. Because we talk about how great it is, but also it's very difficult. To quote Paulo Coelho, whom I completely dislike his writings, but let's just he has this quote in which he says, sometimes your friends are gonna hurt you, and that's okay. And it's good to always remember that, right?
Yeah.
And just to go somewhere else with this conversation, let's maybe talk about what we mean by the paradox of friendship.
You wanna switch gears?
The title. Yeah, let's switch gears.
Yeah.
Maybe. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. About now.
And like, because people are gonna be reading the Only on an Island, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, what's that about?" Right?
Yeah, Only on an Island. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want me to kind of start us off?
Yeah, please do, man.
Okay, so the idea behind Only on an Island and the paradox of friendship. Well, the paradox of friendship, to start off, is the realization, or comes from the realization, that we are essentially biological beings. Okay, and the fact that we are biological beings means that we are inexorably determined to some degree by our genes. Not just that, but it means that we are operated on by evolutionary forces. Now, the fact is that evolutionary forces are forces that act fundamentally at the genetic level, right? So evolution, natural selection, sexual selection, is the process by which frequencies of different genes within the gene pool change, right? And they change by virtue of some genes being more successful, that is, spreading more successfully, so allowing us to reproduce more effectively and producing offspring, or failing to do so, or rather, and failing to do so, right? Now, why am I going on a biology lesson? This is merely tangential, but the idea is that if you are looking at genes from a biological point of view, from an evolutionary point of view, you realize something, and you realize that genes are fundamentally selfish. Now, this is the realization that Richard Dawkins was the first really to encapsulate within his magnum opus. And what he was saying was that genes are the layer at which evolution must act purely selfishly. That is to say, that genes cannot act altruistically. Right? They cannot sacrifice themselves for some other good because they are the end in itself. For all intents and purposes, what is being operated on is genes when it comes to evolution, right? Genes are what will survive. Genes are what is immortal, in a sense. Now, the question is, what good is this information and how does it have any implications on friendship? Well, friendship, let us just define what friendship is, or kind of the basis for friendship. In Yusuf and my eyes, the basis for friendship, I would say, and maybe correct me if you want, Yusuf, but the basis is the following. It is the ability to be altruistic, right? At the level of individual. It is the ability for me to sacrifice some part of my well-being for your own sake, right? But
Absolutely, yeah.
obviously there has to be a constraint on this if we are biological creatures. We cannot purely be altruistic. Otherwise, our genes simply would not reproduce, right? And we are, given that we are programmed by evolution to reproduce our genes, there must be a limit to our altruism, even with friends. Now, pondering what that limit is brings you to the question of, under what circumstances is it the case that friendship must give way to selfishness? This is a difficult question to answer. And a useful analogy to this would be the question of the prisoner's dilemma, right? So the prisoner's dilemma is this concept in game theory, right? Is this game where you have two prisoners who are being asked to confess on each other, and if they both confess, then they both get put in prison. But if one confesses and the other doesn't, the one who confesses doesn't go to prison for as long. The one who does confess the one who's confessed on goes to prison for longer, right? And then if neither of them confess, they are able to escape with the most minimal punishment. Now, why do I bring up the prisoner's dilemma? I bring it up because it allows us to see what it would be like for two individuals to be put against each other in a zero-sum game, so a game where only one of them can win, right, and the other must lose, and in a game that's not iterated, right, so you're only playing one game, and this is exactly allowing us to capture the details of what a world with only genes would be like. So if we only had genes, friendship could not exist. Why? Because necessarily to be altruistic would be to lose. It is a zero-sum game, right? The prisoner's dilemma only allows one person to win, and so you cannot have friendship in that situation, right? Seemingly. At least friendship cannot emerge in that situation, even though friendship would probably be the best for both prisoners. Now, the analogy breaks down to some degree because obviously prisoners are acting at the individual level. There are no genes in mind here. But at the genetic level, it is only by virtue of the fact that we have more than just a single layer at which we are operating. We're not just operating at the genetic layer. We are operating also at the individual layer, right? That we are able to embed some form of basis for friendship, right? And this is where...
Which really,
I was going to say, this is
really,
where you might
which
come
really
in.
just allows your interaction with the world and your friends not to be a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea, right?
Yeah.
So the whole idea is that, well, the benefit of your friend is in some shape or form also the benefit of you, right? Well, for many reasons that might be the case. Well, if your friend is competent, powerful, and honest with you, you are constantly gaining the benefits of that. You have a person who's gonna be there when you actually need them. You know, you're gonna have a person who, as Peterson says, who will cry with you when you're sad, and who will help you celebrate when something good happens. You know, so it's almost never a zero-sum game, and that's really where Only on an Island comes in. And do you want me to go on with that?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so Only on an Island is something, and Ahmed and I tell to each other to remind ourselves of our friendship. It's something along the lines of, "I love you, bro." You know?
It's the evolutionary equivalent of "I love you, bro."
Yeah. Okay, so the idea is, and as Ahmed went on his his AP biology lesson just now.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. And the idea is, well, Only on an Island is, so Ahmed, my friend, only on an island where it's a zero-sum game, where the only way one can happen to just survive and keep living is if one of us kills each other and maybe like
Eats them.
eats them. Yeah,
Or lack of
that's the only way one must survive. In which a game, a situation, a scenario where genetics are playing the sole role in
Yeah.
your survival.
Yeah.
Your biology is playing the sole role. So to say only on an island is me telling Ahmed or Ahmed telling me that, listen, only on an island, only when we are faced by that,
Mm-hmm.
would I not have your best in mind.
Yeah.
Would I not actually be trying to altruistically make you a better person?
Yeah.
Because only in that game, to make you a better person is to directly decrease my chances of survival.
It's to decrease my only chance of survival.
No, decrease
My
yeah,
only
exactly.
chance. The issue is that
decrease
it's
my
the
only-
only chance. Right.
Yeah, decrease my only chance of survival.
Right.
And we add this part to it that only on island, and even all I said, I would still not stab you in the back.
Yeah. And
But I
even
would still
then,
try to make it as honorable.
with virtue.
I was trying exactly. So that's really what we mean when we tell each other only on an island.
Yeah.
Only on an island, faced by our,
Purely genetic,
yeah,
uniterative,
genetic.
zero-sum
Yeah.
dynamic, right?
Yeah.
If our dynamic were to be reduced, the claim is the following: that the only circumstance in which our dynamic would be reduced to the dynamic of two competing genes or two competing sets of genes would be if we were on an island or on some equivalent equivalent game where there is no opportunity of iteration, there is only a zero-sum dynamic, right? That is the only situation in which our dynamic would become analogous to the dynamic of a single game Prisoner's Dilemma or the dynamic of two sets of genes competing for pure propagation. Okay, now obviously it's a hypothetical concept. Obviously we are not ever, and this is fortunately about our current circumstance and fortunate about the general human circumstance. The fact is that at some point in our evolutionary history, it must have become the case that it was so unlikely for us to be in that situation where it is a purely zero-sum dynamic that friendship became what it is today, right? Friendship emerged from the fact that we are usually not in that situation. We're usually not in a zero-sum dynamic. And it emerged from the fact that you are not just genes, you are also individuals. So even if you act self-sacrificially at the individual level, that could still benefit your genes. Not to say that whenever you act altruistically or whenever you're acting at all, you are caring explicitly about your genes, but it is operating in the back of your mind. So we should expect the limits of your altruism and even your friendships to kind of be brushed up against the more analogous to a zero-sum uniterated game your circumstance becomes, right? So if your circumstance is truly scarce, if your circumstance seems like there is no future, that is when friendship, and I would argue morality in general even, and I think Yusuf would argue the same, disappears, right? The basis for morality is the future.
Is the future. Yep.
Right? The ability to perceive an iterated, continuous game where even if I am hurt today because I decided not to hurt you or I decided to benefit you, it will be paid back tomorrow. Okay? There is always an opportunity for it to be paid back tomorrow, and there is always an opportunity to punish those who hurt you today tomorrow. Right? Otherwise, why not hurt people today? So the basis, the nice thing about game theory, the nice thing about biology is not, and these biological concepts, is not that we are saying that everything is captured perfectly by them, but they are models that allow us to enhance our understanding of the limitations of different things. So when I talk to Yusuf and I go, only on an island, my friend, and even then with virtue, this is an admonition of the fact that we have to be friends in every circumstance, but we need not be supremely optimistic or idealistic or utopian about the limits of our friendship. Right? We can actually come to a realistic agreement about when friendship meets its limit. hits its ceiling. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is just to admit of a reality that I think many people who don't want to admit are being cowardly in a way. Because, yeah, obviously there has to be a limit to friendship.
It's also to impose the responsibility upon yourself. Well, when you know the limits of something, you really know how much you can go and how far you can go. So it's also to impose some responsibility on myself, right?
Yeah.
Because, well, if I say we're going to be friends forever, and ever and ever and ever, well, it's just...
No matter what.
That's trivial.
Right?
It's just very trivial. Yeah, no matter what, it's just trivial. But to tell you, well, listen, man, I'm going to be your friend until this exact moment. And, well, there isn't anything worse than that moment, when we're both on an island and we're about to feast on one another, right?
Obviously.
So it's also... Yeah, it's romantic in a sense, right? And
less corny as well. It's more realistic.
No homo, bro.
It's more realistic in the sense that you are able to come to grips with the fact that no matter how much we care about friendship, no matter how much we love it, everything has limits, right? And there are going to be other competing responsibilities, other competing requirements that you are always having to square with your friendship. But if you've just decided that friendship is this ultimate supreme thing where there is no possibility of comparing it to any other thing, then you are just setting yourself up to disappoint your friend or disappoint yourself or to be betrayed, right? Because fact is, yes, under some circumstances, I am not going to be perfectly caring about your altruism purely, Yusuf, right? In fact, as I said, it doesn't even have to get as far as the island, in the sense that as we approach the island, right, as the analogy between our circumstance and the island becomes more and more accurate, right, we should expect each other to be able to give less, right? But it never reaches zero until we're on the island, right? I'll never reach the point where I'm not able to give you anything, Yusuf, until we actually are on the island. But as we approach the island, obviously I will be willing to sacrifice less. And this is something that I think every man definitely should have in mind, because there is a kind of dynamic between masculine groups and masculine individuals who kind of sometimes imagine themselves to have some sort of supreme ultimate friendship, which is somehow betrayed when perhaps a woman comes in, right?
Yeah.
And coming to grips with the fact that, yes, there are going to be limitations to friendship, right? And that doesn't...
As there will be limitations to whatever relationship succeeds or that friendship, right?
Yeah.
And also, well, pertaining to that point, right? I wanted to talk about something. So I want to talk about this. Maybe we can put it on some sort of, like what? Okay, let me just put it this way. So there seems to be two temperamental manifestations of the way people view friendships, or there seems to be two very heavy centers of gravity.
Okay.
So one of them is the view that the world is a zero-sum game, right? That there's this view that you can't actually be friends with anyone.
Yeah.
It is all this, like, I cannot lose myself in the sentimentality of friendship, because at the end of the day,
we are just genes.
I am purely competing with the person who I'm supposedly friends with.
Yeah.
And the other center of gravity is I'm friends with everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone is my friend. I respect everyone. And
the expansive circle of sympathies as well. Even Darwin quoted that he wants us to expand our circle of sympathies. And go on. It's interesting to see how that could even be a pitfall.
Yeah. So, well, it's absolutely a pitfall, right? Because, well, while the world is not a zero-sum game, you don't have an infinite capacity to tap into all the sum of the world. It's absolutely, you don't have enough resources to be friends with everyone,
or to love the world either, right?
Yeah,
even more so.
I'm not talking about material resources. You simply don't have the physical resources that constitute your being, right? You cannot be there for everyone at all times, and you cannot in any way. It's impossible to invest your time in everyone equally.
Yeah, it's attentional resources, emotional resources, temporal resources. You just don't have a sufficient amount to be able to, even
yes.
cognitively, we are not set up to be able to connect with everyone. You cannot be friends with everyone, because then there is no meaning to friendship, right? It's just meaningless. What distinguishes a friend from an enemy then?
Yeah. So the point is, where it's to be wise in friendship, and that's why I believe, just out of this consequentialist argument, that you literally have a moral you have a moral responsibility to pick your friends. If you need to pick the friends who are worth your time, who are worth the resources that you can give, people who can make you grow, and and people who you can give to, and it will be a good friendship. Because it's not you need to situate yourself in the middle. You need to understand that it's possible to be friends with someone.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's where comes the paradox, right? Which the paradox is, it's possible to be friends with someone, but really at the genetic level, if you're playing a zero-sum game, it's not.
Yeah.
At that stage,
it is only possible because we are multi-layered creatures, because we have our genes, but we are also individuals. And so any cost that is incurred by the individual can still be later repaid to the genes by some other benefit, right? So if I am self-sacrificial to help Yusuf today, that's not the end of the story, right? Because in the future, I am likely to need Yusuf. He's my friend, right? I am interfacing with him regularly, right? I'm likely to need him. And it doesn't mean that I am helping him because he's going to help me in the future. That's not the point. But the reason why friendship would have even evolved was in this iterated game framework in which we are not simply our genes. Because if a gene helped another gene today and there was no tomorrow, right, or even if there was a tomorrow, right, if it helped another gene at its own expense, that would be the end of that gene, right? It just would not be it would not be benefited, right? But again, the reciprocity emerges the moment you have future. The moment you have the future as an object that is continuous, then you can have morality. Then you can have reciprocity. Then you can have punishment even of those who deviate. But that's another discussion for another time. But
it's almost as if morality is not, it's contingent on the future, but it's also contingent on the fact that we can be friends, or the fact that we can create bonds that transcend our genetic, let's say this, our genetic setup. That it's above that you can. Morality wouldn't really make sense if you're a single creature just fending for yourself in a world where every single person is, there's only one piece of cake. Every single person is just trying to get that piece of cake. There's no way we can make more cake, and it's just there.
Any single game does not permit morality to emerge. A single game where it is zero sum, let's say, a single zero sum game cannot allow for morality, right? If you were just a gene and everyone else was just a gene, and it was just the genes competing for some resource that would allow them to spread, that is the equivalent of a zero-sum competitive game that is uniterated, where you cannot have morality, right? Where people cannot be helpful to each other, because if they are, they hurt themselves. And if they hurt themselves, that's the end, right? So the idea that friendship is a paradox, and even I think that paradox extends beyond simply the fact that we say, it would be impossible were we not individuals, right? It's only a paradox until you realize there's multi-layers, right? If you look at the gene, then it's impossible. If you look at the individual, suddenly it emerges from that problem as a solution. But the paradox even extends to this, what you just mentioned with the two centers of gravity. The paradox runs through these two things, which is at some point you could be a person who believes, even unconsciously, that you are nothing but your genes. And so you think that any friendship, any involvement with friends is in zero-sum contest with the benefit of your family or the benefit of you as an individual, right? And that is clearly, this is one of the most, perhaps mentally most destructive forms of being in the world, right? And also just, it is just not true, right? On the one side, it's just not true. On the other hand, it is also just such a bad way of living in the world that it is liable to cause you suffering and those around you suffering, because you insist that any expending of resources on anyone outside the household or outside the family is just terrible. And I think this is a common idea that is perhaps more common in cultures perhaps like yours and mine, Yusuf, especially with parents, where friends are seen as these just, in general, just these leeches. They'll take advantage of you. But I mean, there's some truth to that, because you have to be selective, because some friends aren't actually friends. But friendship is possible, right? It is possible. And healthy friendship is possible. On the other hand, the idea that you can be friends with everyone is just a temperamental miscalibration that is just as disastrous as the other one. Because on the one hand, it's not true, again, because, well, you can't be friends with everyone, as we've already covered. But on the other hand, it's also the case that it's a terrible way of living, because you're just setting yourself up for betrayal and for disappointment. Because if you're friends with everyone, you have no idea how to distinguish between who is actually investing time in you, who loves you, who cares about you, and who doesn't. And yeah, both are just really bad ways, I think, of operating. Yeah. Bad software.
So I was hoping we could conclude this episode on a brief talk about, good faith and what it actually means to be a good friend. Right. I was hoping to get your insight on that, and I'd give mine too. So
Well, for me, something that has been funnily enough, before I started this episode, one of my friends, not knowing necessarily that we were recording this episode, messaged me and asked me why we are even friends, right? And they asked me, I'm not as smart as Yusuf necessarily, and my response was something along the lines of, you have to have a bit more of good faith than that, right? I'm not just friends with people because they are smart. That's not how friendships happen, right? I'm not just friends with people because I'm using them or because I feel good with them around. It's not as simple as that, right? Being friends with someone is a lot deeper than that. And you have to have the good faith to believe that your friend actually values you, right? Now, obviously, it's always useful to get that reassurance. And I did reassure the person. I did tell them that there are a number of dimensions that I can say play a role, but I could not ever explain to that person perfectly why we are friends. And that's part of the beauty of friendship, because part of it is discovering who you are in your friends, as we mentioned at the beginning. And having the good faith to understand that your friend actually cares about you. And to know that, right? If they have demonstrated that they are, if you have no reason to believe otherwise. And to also be the kind of person who attracts those kinds of friends by also doing that yourself. That's where the beauty lies, I think. That's where the beauty of friendship lies. If you are a person who is honest, if you're a person who is good faith, you will generally attract people who are like that as well. And my friend who said that, really, and anyone else who thinks this way, needs to understand that friendship is beyond just a list of characteristics that you share or things that you're interested in that you share, right? It's about values, but it's also about time spent together, right? And about the assumptions you make with respect to each other. And just basking in the fact that you both are human, can enjoy each other's company.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if
So
that answers your question, but
no, it does, and I'd like just to end on a note here. So Ahmed and I always talk about this, and it's the fact that you are not friends with the immediate person you're friends with, right? You are friends with their potential.
mm,
So Ahmed and I usually we'd stand on the beach and we'd look at each other and be like, I'm not just friends with you. I'm not gonna stop until you reach your best potential.
yeah.
And this always reminds me of this scene from Good Will Hunting.
Mm.
Really good film.
Yeah,
We
we
recommend.
we've said that so many times now. I think we
Yeah.
can work as sponsors for them,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. In which Ben Affleck tells Matt Damon is a genius, but he has these offers from all universities, all of the like
Yeah.
Ivy League elitist universities in the U.S. for his mathematical genius,
Mm.
and he tells Ben Affleck that, well, I want to stay here and do construction,
Mm.
and Matt Damon goes, no. He just goes like, no.
Mm.
And it's not because you owe it to yourself. It's because you owe it to me,
Mm.
right? It's because I'm not just friends with you. I'm friends with the potential I see in you, and that's really where trust needs to be practiced. Because I don't see trust as only a feeling or an emergent emotion that comes when you really love someone. Although it can be that,
Yeah.
but I feel also that trust is practice.
Mm.
Trust is when your emotions and how you're feeling are telling you something about someone, yet you choose to practice to believe them. You choose to practice to believe in their potential.
Mm.
And I mean, friendship is not all cooperation, right? I mean, it has some form of competition,
Healthy rivalry and
that
competition.
healthy competition, healthy rivalry that is engraved in that bigger circle of cooperation. So one must also afford mercy to their friends. One must also be merciful, but must not be dismissive if they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's just that you should not stop demanding of your friends to reach their best potential.
Mm.
You should balance that with being merciful, understanding that they're fragile sometimes.
Yeah.
But you need to understand that they are more than what they are right now. And you need to understand that you need to choose people who already understand that, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you reach a certain age, I mean, if you're young, then, well, no one comes to that conclusion yet.
Mm.
But at some point, you need to understand that the person in front of you, or I see it that way, that you cannot be friends with someone if you're 25 or 24, a person who does not understand that they have some role to play in their life and they can be more than who they are right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that really would be my final notes.
Mm.
If you want to add anything.
Yeah, just something to maybe people who are looking at younger people who are selecting their friends. I don't know, maybe if you're a young person yourself, or if you're a parent or something like that, you have a younger brother, because I'm in the stage where I'm having a younger brother who is at a sensitive age, and we've been extolling the virtues of friendship to some degree throughout this discussion, but we do not at all underestimate the degree to which friends can also ruin your life, right, to some degree, or play a significant role in doing that. And we cannot underestimate or understate the degree to which selectivity with friends and with anyone really in anything that you decide to do is a crucial thing to teach and a crucial thing to learn. You have to learn to know when someone is a good friend and to know when someone is not, when someone is just using you or keeping you around because it's useful, or when you are just going there because you want to leech off of that person being terrible, because then you feel like you're just so much better. This is something that is so common with people who are particularly high in potential but very lazy. They end up surrounding themselves with people who are just far lower than they are in terms of potential. People who are already kind of far gone in a way, right? People who are drug addicts or just people who are in general so lazy that there is no way that they could offer a competitive argument against what the other person is doing, right? But just don't do that. Like, it's one of the worst things you could possibly do. If you are constantly surrounding yourself with, for lack of a better word, losers, you are going to become a loser, right? And if you're in a group like that, try to not become a loser so that you can then help them not become losers, right? That's the best thing you can do for those friends. But if they're being toxic, move away. Get out of there. It is a bad thing to stay there. And to end on basically a quote from Peterson again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make friends with those who want the best for you. Don't ever settle for less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
so with that being said, Ahmed, I think we should end it here, and I hope we get to keep being friends.
Yeah.
And crying together on the beach.
Only on an island, my friend.
Only
on an island.
Just laughing and crying together. And saying crude jokes that we hope nobody ever hears.
Yeah, and then launching it off as a podcast. Yeah, what a great strategy for keeping people from hearing this.
Absolutely.
Anyway, guys.
Man.
Thank you for listening to Experiments in Dialogue. You have been here with us, Yusuf and Ahmed. If you like our podcast, please like us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to support us further, check out our Patreon.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care, guys.
Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.